Oh yeah?
Yeah. Like the wire keeps moving and then this side
Hello, good evening, people. Today is a great day. Amazing things happened today. I am excited, and here we are. Today is 21st of November. I am calming down now, but I'm still excited. However, today's topic is going to be something quite, I don't know, I can't find the correct word to describe the topic. The topic is depression in the youth depression. Now, a lot of young people, especially in the diaspora, are experiencing this depression, or they're going through a depressive stage in their lives. And it seems to hang over their heads like, a cloud. And that cloud sometimes, unfortunately, does not move from over their heads. They are going through things which we all need to help, especially parents. Parents, you need to pay attention to your children. And that's why this is about the third time I'm having this program. Today I'm joined by a lady called Denise Brown. Now, Denise Brown studied psychology at university in Birmingham, and she did voluntary work, mentoring young people, and then she's had various teaching positions here and abroad in Africa, right?
That's right.
And then she which made her realize that she wanted to be a full-time youth worker. And Denise has worked for the Prince's Trust, supporting young people aged between 11 and 25, and is now a founder of For Young Minds.
That's it. That's the one.
Well, youth well-being workshops and mentoring service. Oh my God, I'm so pleased to have you on my show.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be invited.
Oh, you are the best person to be on my show tonight, because youth mentoring and youth issues are very important to me. Our children are our future.
Exactly. That's exactly what I say.
Yes, and so I am so happy to have you here, and I don't know how to express my excitement because people don't know something that we know. But we're not going to tell them. We'll tell them at the end. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Both ears. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Now, we're going to talk about depression, but before we do that, I need people to know something, which is that children go through all sorts of situations. It's not all of it that's depression. Sometimes it could be bereavement, and they're suffering bereavement, or they're suffering rejection, or they're suffering grief of different sorts. So sometimes it's girlfriend issues, boyfriend issues. Sometimes it's because mommy didn't buy them this or that. All of that could be sadness, annoyance, all sorts of things. That's not depression. Depression is much more serious, isn't it?
Much more serious. So to notice depression in a young person, you would look for things like, extended periods of very, very low mood. So we're not just talking about a period of sadness, then you see them laughing and joking with their friends across the road 5 minutes later, then they, it's not like that. And then you also start to see things like they lose interest in things that would normally have been really exciting for them. So maybe someone who was once very athletic starts to drop out of things like football, starts to become more and more secluded from their friends and family. You would start to notice those kind of symptoms, loss of sleep, those kind of symptoms that are much more ongoing than a child who's a bit upset because a parent didn't buy them something. So it's really important not to confuse a child being sad with a child being depressed.
I see. Now, how do you then, because you could have a stroppy child at home.
Of course.
So how do you then notice that this is depression and not sadness or difficulty or stroppiness?
So the one thing I want to make very, very clear from the offset with this conversation is that I'm speaking from a place of supporting young people for mental health. So I'm by no means trying to be, someone who's diagnostic or anything like that. But I'm able to, if a young person, for example, was to come to me on a number of occasions in our one-to-ones, for example, and is reporting periods of low mood for, I don't know, we're working together for 3 months, 6 months, and I'm still hearing the same low mood, haven't done anything today, haven't been able to leave home today, that kind of thing. When you start to hear extended periods of that low mood, then you can start to then tell that young person that maybe they need to go and seek professional help and it may be possible depression. But I would never turn to a young person, and you can never, it's very important never to put that seed in someone's head straight away. But it's always, if you're starting to be concerned, then check it out. Never just plant that seed and make a person think, oh, straight away, depression.
So when you say seed, like you tell them that, oh, are you depressed? Or...
Almost like the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have got a child who's been upset for, I don't know, let's say 2 weeks about a friend or, an argument they've had. If a child's been upset for 2 weeks, we can't call that an extended period. I'm talking about real months of consistent low mood, losing interest, loss of appetite, that kind of thing. You would start to notice extended periods as opposed to a couple of weeks, and it would be consistent. There's no real fluctuation in the mood in that time.
Low, and it stays there, it doesn't change, and the situation is very dire.
Exactly like you said about the cloud. In fact, that's one of the ways I like to talk to young people about depression, because there is a video, and it'll be good if we share this link after as well for young people and even adults suffering with depression. It's called Dealing with the Dark Cloud. It's on YouTube, and it's just a visual representation of depression and how we shouldn't ignore that it's there. Rather accept, embrace, understand that some days the cloud will be bigger, some days the cloud will be smaller, but it's learning how to live with it as opposed to it controlling your life and your mood. Because it's very, very possible for someone to have depression and be able to get to a place of recovery and being able to move on with their life. And the main message I want to be able to say as well is there's no such thing as, snap recovery. One day you're depressed and one day you're not.
So when people say, oh, snap out of it, stop being silly.
Oh, I hate that statement. It's probably the worst thing you can say to someone with depression, snap out of it. It's almost like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Of course you can't tell someone with depression to snap out of it. If they could, they definitely would have. No one wants to,
be sad or
no one wants to feel
or...
low moods and lose interest in things that they once really enjoyed. Of course they want to be able to feel that, but it genuinely becomes a place where they cannot see that anymore. And it does become consuming. So it's always important I like to use that representation for them to see that, yes, okay, so it has consumed you for now. It's about understanding and never trying to sugarcoat. Let that young person understand what is happening to them and how they can learn to live with it. There's no one way that depression will ever manifest itself for everyone. Everyone's depression is different. Everyone's mental health is their own. So it's about teaching that young person how to manage their own depression and just recognizing the days when they're feeling better, higher. I'm not going to say better because it just turns off, but the days when their mood is elevated, what did you do to make yourself feel that way today? Starting to notice the patterns of when you are able to get up and you did enjoy something. It's just starting to recognize those patterns of how to make yourself feel better.
So what happens if they can't make them feel better? And what happens if maybe the parents can't identify that there's something wrong with the child, and so it just carries on for like 3-4 months, and they're sad at school. In fact, they're demotivated, so they go to school, they're difficult, they don't want to be part of anything, in fact, and then the parents think, oh, I've got a difficult child, without realizing that it's not difficulty, it's more of the child is going through something terrible. What do you do?
So I'm actually really glad you've asked that, and this is where I like to be able to bring real examples into things. So for example, the young people that were under 16 that I worked with was at the Prince's Trust. That was a particular program that was for disengaged learners. And for the listeners who cannot see me right now, I did that in air quotes because, of course, if a young person has got a mental health concern, that is going to present as a disengaged learner because they're going to be disengaged.
Yeah,
if they're struggling, of course.
Going to be paying attention.
Exactly. So this is why one of the things that For Young Minds wants to focus on is teachers and parents training, because it can't just be the young person. They're not on their own in this. Now there's factors that are not even in a parent or a teacher's control. Social media, bullies, all that kind of stuff is not even in the control of the parents and teachers anymore. So you can't just expect the young person alone to be able to deal with everything happening for them. So speaking from, sorry, my headphones are going. There we go. So speaking from that one example for it. So when I was working in the school, he was put on the program as a disengaged learner. He's now in year 11 and in our one-to-ones. The good thing about him is in those situations where we were one-to-one, he was very, very open about it. And that's why I really respected him for it, because it's not.
How do you mean open about it?
He was very honest with me as to what he was going through. It wasn't like he was trying to hide anything, So this young person, I will not say any names today, of course.
No, of course
not.
not.
Of course. So this young person,
need examples for the other parents or people who have young people in their care, or identify the examples that you give.
Okay, so I can set the whole scene in terms of the young person, the parents and the teachers for this example, because I literally was very lucky and I'm very grateful that I was able to be in a position to work so holistically with a young person with their mental health. So, I mean, this young person, he was in year 11, his exams are in a few months. He's on this program almost as if we're supposed to just turn everything around for him in 12 weeks, He's got his exams coming up. He's admitted to being suicidal. He's self-harmed and he's honest about it. He shows me when he self-harms. His mum knows when he self-harms. They're aware of it, that he does self-harm. And self-harm is very much a stage
the end stage of depression.
I wouldn't even call it an end stage because, like I said, everyone's depression is different. So I don't want to use the term end stage to say that that's, the end of the line for depression, because it's not that. So someone who would be self-harming can very much be either using that. It can actually be cry for help.
Okay.
For in his example, I asked him what his reasons were, because it's so important to understand the root. And I think the problem with youth mental health is that you just see the surface level. So you see calling him a disengaged learner. Have you gone into the depth as to find out why he is disengaged with education?
Yeah.
I was only working with him for 12 weeks. That boy was in school for how many years? And no one had that one conversation with him to find out as to why he was so disengaged. We got so much out of him in that short time. as to what was happening for him. So his home life was very manic. I mean, if we take it from the teacher's perspective, for example, calling him a disengaged learner, automatically I'm sure they want to wag their finger at the parents. You know, he's not getting to school on time. He's always going to sleep late. It's the bad parenting. If you take a step back and actually take a holistic view at things, which was why I was so glad to be able to do that, when I was able to work with his mum, because I realized trying to tell this young person, you know, he needs to be on the medication that he's been given. He's already been given medication at this stage, by the way. I'll say that now. So he needs to be on the medication for his ADHD to be able to focus in school. He told me that he didn't feel that he could actually focus when he was on that. He didn't feel that he was able to learn when he was taking those tablets, but they did make his mood better. So he was always in that sort of juggle of, do I want to feel happier today or do I want to learn today? So he really struggled with that. And when you take a step back and actually spoke to the parent, you then found out that she actually had another child who had huge developmental needs, you know, one child that wasn't able to go to the bathroom on his own. So she's swamped with that. She also got 2 twin girls and then a 16-year-old who's struggling with his mental health. So she's already, you know, out of her depth. And this is why it's so important to also support the parent, because she just had no idea how to help him at home. He was going to bed at like 3 a.m. being on his Xbox. Like there was just no control, no guidance at home, to make no help. But I don't want to now point the finger there and say that was her fault, because they just don't know. It's because mental health has had this stigma, we don't talk about it. And it is only until we're able to talk about mental health in the same way we talk about physical health that I feel that parents and children will be able to have that conversation at home. Because when he admitted that the reason he doesn't talk to his mum about it is because he doesn't want her to feel worried, feel stressed, feel swamped. So he was suffering at home alone in silence, because more likely he was worried about his mum and how she would feel about it. Yeah. So it's so important to also support the parents, and parents need to know how to be, you know, a little bit more like youth workers sometimes too, just to take that step back and be able to actually take the concern away and have their child talk to them like a youth worker. I know it's easier said than done, but I'm hoping that's what the training will do.
Yeah, it's very important. The thing is, some people leave their children to other people, or they kind of feel that this is the school's work, or this is this person's work, this is social worker's job, but really parenting is a big thing and parents should get involved. Nobody's blaming parents. We're not blaming you, but we kind of feel that it's important that people engage with their children and have little chats with them. And I am a parent, and I know that children can be very difficult at times, and when you want to speak to them, they don't want to talk to you and all of that, but you have to find a balance.
So this is exactly what I would want to try and stress when I do start parents and carers training for young people with mental health concerns. And the thing I want to stress is mostly just the sort of the model that you use around trying to speak to a young person about their mental health. Sorry. And also just encouraging, you know, small, subtle self-help tools at home. So they don't necessarily have to feel like self-help tools. But for example, with this young person, a small change, like I spoke to his mum and I said, just try and encourage at dinner time, you guys eat at the table and no devices. Just that small 30 minutes of time without his phone, without Fortnite, whatever else he's playing on, just that family time. And I mean, no one's going to say there's just a magic marker for everything and it's going to make everyone's problems better. But that small change allowed him to start being able to get to school earlier in the mornings, because he and his mum were now having a conversation about why he was so late in the morning. It turns out that obviously he was sleeping late because he's locked in his room with his Xbox. And if they hadn't had that conversation over the dinner table, I don't know when they would have had it.
Yeah.
So it's necessary to just pull your child away from devices. I know I'm probably guilty as well. I mean, you saw me on my phone just before we went live.
No, it's something, social media has controlled all of us. You wake up in the morning and your eye is not open yet, but you're reaching for your phone.
You know, there was an article that actually said that something like 80% of Londoners pick up their phone before their feet even touch the ground.
It's me.
It's me. I'm one of the 80%.
Yeah,
it's my morning newspaper.
Yeah, I look at it, I check what's happening, what's the time, am I late, you know, and then you think, oh, and then suddenly there's a message, and then you look at other ones, and it's crazy.
You just get sucked in.
Yeah.
Really easily.
We've got a caller I'm gonna try and take this call. Speech.
Ooh.
Oh gosh.
Don't know.
No, we're not doing that. That one went off. Okay. Yep. Switch that caller off. But if you want to call, the number to call is 0203 735 8820 or 0208 286 0185. We're going to go on a break because I think people need to hear some music. And while all that is going on, we shall come back and tell you some interesting things. Some more interesting things. This song is very strange, but I think you'll enjoy it. Somebody was calling.
Oh, we lost them. It's okay, they'll come back. Ah.
So how are you feeling?
Yeah, it's easy to talk about, but I just hope I don't lose. Sometimes I get the question and I end up going off on a tangent because I'm talking about everything. Yeah.
We can talk about as it's something that you're interested in. Saying what it. People are curious.
The next thing I want to talk about is the actual support model of how you should speak to a young person who's suffering. If you wanted to try and have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah. If you do think someone, because it's important, if you do think someone is suffering, it's probably better to ask. So when I was doing my training, it actually said, we watched a video from a young person who had depression. And she was suicidal. And she said in the video, after she had recovered, I would have given anything for someone to just ask me, are you suicidal? So that weight is lifted and she can say yes. And it was so powerful for me to hear that kind of thing from literally another young person on a video, you know. This is why it's so important for young people to tell us how they want to be spoken to, how they want to discuss it. It's a different world at the end of the day. It's a completely different world.
It is. It's a different world that, you know, sometimes it's your children. As somebody said to me today, it's your child. But you've lost all communication.
There's so many factors that are so beyond your control now that you're a foreign object to them. Like their phone, the people on their phone, the people in their immediate circle, that's their life. Parents, siblings, I don't care. If my people on here aren't thinking I'm cool, or that's what matters. My mum can tell me I'm the most incredible person on the planet, and if these people here aren't telling me the same thing, it doesn't mean anything. And that's just the world we live in now.
We're gonna go back. Somebody's playing around with them. Listen, can you hear the music?
In this ear, not this one. Now, if he's jumping, this one keeps jumping. I can't wait for Ghana. I miss this song. I haven't heard it in a long time.
You like this song? I used to myself. Yep, we're back. That was a small break so that we could drink water and kind of get our thoughts together and then kind of continue. Today we're talking about depression and the effects depression has on us, our children. And it's mostly our children that we're interested in today because, I mean, the percentages and the figures and the way that things go is making it quite worrying about how things are affecting our children. It is so sad and it is so worrying as well. Well, anyway, my guest today is Denise Brown, as I said before, and she has had a lot of experience with young people. She's worked with Princess Trust, and I'm saying this again because maybe you just joined us. So, Denise, yeah, we were talking and you were about to tell me some more.
Yeah, so I think the next thing I really wanted to focus in on, and I'll repeat it again because it's, I think, probably the most useful youth worker tip that I can give in terms of having a conversation with young people. So as I said at the beginning, for anyone that has just tuned in, I am not, you know, by any means a psychiatrist, a practitioner, any of that. I can only speak from a place of supporting young people who have been going through this. And a lot of those young people, maybe, I mean, considering the program I was on and the young people I worked with, some of them, you know, were maybe youth offenders, from care leaver backgrounds. They came from all sorts of places. So it's interesting to see that despite the background, mental health conditions were common amongst so many of them. And the fact that so many of them maybe didn't have, I don't know, family who they could speak to about this kind of thing, it put me in a position where some young people were able to confide in me about, you know, things like this, and which maybe makes me able to talk about it from this perspective. And I think that's probably what gives me the experience and knowing how best to have a conversation with a young person. So the main thing I would definitely say is, if you do want to have a conversation around their mental health, if young people will probably never come to you to have that conversation first. But
is it because you're a parent or a teacher or what? Why will they not want to talk to you?
I mean, I can't speak for all young people. Some are, you know, young people have amazing relationships with their parents and are able to do that. And I'm not saying if you don't have a good relationship with your child, that is why they haven't spoken to you.
Okay.
In fact, if I was to put myself in a child's shoes, I have a really good relationship with my mum, but I feel like the fact that I did have such a good relationship with her it would have made it even harder for me to speak to her, because I wouldn't want her to worry. And that is definitely a common theme amongst the young people I spoke to, is, I don't want to tell my mum, it's just going to make her more worried. She's got so much on her plate already. You know, I don't want to talk to her about things. I don't want her to worry. And I understand where they're coming from. I mean, when you have a parent worrying and that's in the house with you constantly, it can actually get a bit too much on top of what you're already going through when you've got a parent also sort of on top of it. So main thing, if you want to have a conversation with a young person, ask them questions. But not from a place of trying to be nosy, almost literally trying to understand how they are feeling. Like it probably has been a while that they've been dealing with this in their mind on their own. So to have someone ask them questions, and not leading questions, it's really important never to use leading questions like, oh, you know, are you depressed? Are you sad? Don't lead with questions. How are you feeling? You know, what's going on with you today? That kind of thing. Lead, like,
how
open
has
questions.
your day been?
Yeah, open questions. Let them come to you. And obviously the longer you have that conversation, you'll start to feel how that young person is responding to you and the kind of questions that you're able to ask based on how they're responding to you. You know, if they're being very closed straight away, it might be that you need to ask a few more questions before. The next stage is definitely the listening part. And I think when I say the word listen, everyone will assume that I just mean, you know, just sit there with your ears open and just listen to them. But I mean, really listen, not listening to give advice, not listening to give feedback or to respond to what they're saying. Because as humans, you hear something and automatically you want to almost challenge and be like, oh, but you know, that's not that bad. Or you want to silver line it. You want to make them see, actually, it's not that bad. But listen to them. They're telling you this because they've been suffering with it. There's no point trying to now tell them that what they're thinking or feeling is unjustified or, you know, isn't valid. If that is what's making them feel that way, whether you agree with it or not, or you think, oh, but that's not a reason to be, that's not your place to say anything. It is their mental health. And if it has had that effect on them, listen to them. Whatever it is, listen to them. The next stage is definitely about giving advice. And when I say give advice, of course, like I said, I'm not a practitioner. I'm not a well-being, I'm not a well-being person to be able to give advice from a psychiatrist perspective. But I can give advice in terms of your well-being and just being able to make small changes to your day, you know? So one of the things is definitely trying to encourage more routine in young people. So from the young people that would come in would maybe say that they haven't been able to leave home for the past 6 months. They haven't done anything. They're not interested in anything.
They haven't gone to school.
I mean, the young people I worked with,
They hadn't been to school.
Not in education, employment or training. So NEET, that is actually the young people, that is the cohort of young people that I worked with. They were not in anything. And this is why I say a common factor for young people who aren't able to go to school, who aren't, you know, in training, education, anything, or working, mental health factors, so common amongst NEET young people. So this is why I was saying earlier, all the young people we worked with came from different backgrounds, care leavers, youth offenders. They were so broad, but mental health was common amongst all of them.
Yeah.
So to not be in education and training, I'm saying that mental health usually is a common factor of that. It can play a role into why you're not able to go to school. So remember, I was talking about the young person, the stigma around mental health itself alone, let alone the condition. The stigma is usually worse than the condition itself.
Is it?
So yeah. So, oh, I really wanted one of my young people to call in and chat tonight, but he's out. But I told him I would mention his story and give him, well, I'm not going to give him a proper shout out, but I told him I would mention his story. So he's the shining example, I think, of why it's so important for us to break down this stigma and make it easy enough to talk about mental health in the same way we do physical health. This young person, you would never ever suspect anything was happening with him. He's so charming, he still smiles every day, but when he came in to talk to me, he was in the darkest place he could describe, like, in his life. And of course, for a 20-year-old, that's relative to their life, but he said that was the darkest place he had ever been. And he was athletic, he used to do football, he was like head boy, he was one of those kind of,
really,
football,
oh
football captain, head boy, that kind of student.
This is really good. I'm happy you said that, because people think that if you're depressed and you're not things are not going well for you, you're under a duvet, you don't want to come out of your room, you're, even maybe if you're a girl, you're crying all the time, stomping your feet, being having tantrums and being difficult. But it's interesting because this is new to me.
Yeah, it's because there's no one way.
Yeah,
there's no one size fits all for depression, as I've said already today. There's no one way. No two people are ever going to experience their symptoms in the same way. So him being able to still be smiling and everything, that was a mask for him. The way he was feeling inside was completely different. But the reason I mentioned the stigma being worse than the condition itself sometimes is, yes, he was feeling low, but he didn't feel that he could talk to anyone. So this is a young Asian male. So, I mean, we're African. We know what the stigma in the Black community is like when it comes to mental health. We act like it doesn't exist.
It doesn't. Especially if it's your child. There's nothing wrong with it. It
doesn't exist. And it's like, but by doing that, you're making things worse.
Yes.
So this is what I mean about the stigma, like not being able to talk to someone as much as you want to. The words are there, but this cloud around it because of the stigma physically stops you from doing it. So for this young person in particular, he just stopped going to football. He stopped going just because I don't want to face anyone. I don't want people to start guessing there's something wrong with me. I'm just not going to go. So he stopped doing that. Then it was school. I'm not going to go to school. So he dropped out of college because it was, again, I don't want people to realize anything's wrong with me there. Because, of course, he's this shining example. He feels that people are looking at him. And although on the outside he looks fine, inside he's feeling like I cannot go to school anymore. People are eventually going to figure out what's going on with me and I cannot talk about it. So this is why I was saying the stigma, him worried about how people are going to perceive him, is eventually what knocked him out of school, out of football, out of the things that he loved doing. And it just makes it grow. So you isolate yourself more and more and more until eventually you're in this situation where you've stopped doing all the things that you love and you don't even remember how to enjoy them anymore because you're so scared of the people judging you when you're there, being able to, the people that you consider your friends, being able to speak to them. So it's difficult. I understand why, young people do struggle to talk about their mental health. I think the stigma is definitely what needs to be tackled before we can start talking about mental health in a way that we do physical health. So the same way a child will come to their mum, I've got a headache. They should be able to, hopefully, in the next, I'd like to hope sooner than 10 years, hopefully sooner than that, they should be able to go to their parent and say, you know what, mum, I'm having panic attacks, or whatever it may be. They should be able to talk to them in exactly the same way that they would say they've got a headache. And I'm really hoping we're able to get to a place. But I think the stigma is definitely what needs to be addressed and normalized first.
I don't know. I'm speechless, and this is very rare for me to be speechless. But this is very difficult for me because now it shows that there are people who are doing normal things. I'm talking about young people doing normal things, and they know that there is something wrong, and I can't deal with it. And then after a while, they stop, and they totally stop. And this is a signal, though, for the rest of, parent, teacher, whoever, to notice that there's something going on.
Starting to withdraw.
Yeah, because they're withdrawing from their normal. Yes. Somebody said that, one of the things for depressives is to do sports because sports helps. But it looks like There are, and I saw, as I was researching this, I realized that there are sportsmen who are depressed.
Yeah. This is one of the things I love to do in my workshops. You love to, put the biggest manliest man. So I love to use The Rock as an example because he's the epitome of big man,
brawn,
nothing ever wrong with me.
Healthy.
Yeah, he's So for him to open up about having bipolar is so powerful, and it's such a good tool for young people to see that, look, it is okay. You are not going to be the only person, and the more we talk about it, you will realize you're not the only person dealing with it, because more people will come forward. Oh my gosh, that's like me. I've been there. I've felt that. And then suddenly we're all talking about it, and we realize actually we all, it's not something to be ashamed of. We all have one. We all have a mental health. So another good way I like to normalize mental health for people, and again, apologies for people who are listening and not watching, but the mental health spectrum is probably one of the best tools I love to use for young people when I'm trying to show them that, look, this is nothing to be ashamed of. So I usually like to draw this, but I'll try my best to explain it. So imagine.
I have paper here.
Okay, I can raise it and I can show you at least and explain as I'm drawing it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull the paper.
I'll keep it simple. I won't make it too difficult.
Have you got a pen?
I do.
There you go. She's gonna draw something and I'm gonna hold it up to the camera and show you all.
It just makes life a little bit easier to explain what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, say you have almost like a matrix shape, which is just a cross for people who are listening again. I don't even know if that's the right word. Again,
matrix
apologies.
Shape.
Is that the right word?
A cross shape.
So, say you've got no diagnosis on one end and diagnosis on another end, and then you have good well-being function, and then poor well-being function at the bottom. So what I like to explain is that there's no such thing. You don't just go from well to unwell. And
it's a process.
It's a process. And I don't even want to say the word process. It's a spectrum. And every single person, me, you included, we all sit on it. Every single one of us with and we all have mental health. So we all sit on this spectrum. So again, going back to it. So say you have at one end no diagnosis and diagnosis. A person with no diagnosis, so okay, let's use me for example. I haven't been diagnosed with anything. No. I have no known mental health condition as yet. Yeah. So I would sit at this end. But I could have poor well-being function, for example. So I haven't got a diagnosis, but I'm not getting out of bed much. I'm functioning poorly. You're anyway. Demotivated.
You have no wish to do normal things that everyone else is doing. You don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to kick ball.
None of it. Don't want to do any of that. I'm still maybe losing sleep. And I actually suffer with insomnia. So this is how I'm saying we all sit on this spectrum.
We are all there.
We're all there. I suffer with insomnia. I don't know where that puts me, but there's obviously something going on that's keeping me awake at night, right? So if you have no diagnosis but you're poorly functioning, there could be someone at the end of the line with a diagnosis of depression. Let's use depression for example.
We've got a caller on. I don't want to cut you, but person's gone off.
You keep losing. I'm talking too much.
I'm sorry. Because I'm watching you as you speak. And then the phone starts flashing. It doesn't ring, you see. So I see the light. By the time I've seen it, it's gone off.
I'm very sorry.
So caller, you can call again.
I'll turn myself towards the light as well, so we can both be watching the phone.
We can both watch it.
Yeah. So sorry. So if someone at the other end of the spectrum, for example, has a diagnosis of depression, they could have exceptional well-being function. They can be able to leave the house every day, but they are still suffering with depression. They've still got a diagnosis of depression. And this is why I say to someone, just because you have, you ended up with a diagnosis of a mental health condition, don't think this is it for me.
Yeah.
That's
this is the end of the world. Your life is ended.
And it
hasn't.
We're on a spectrum, and there is ways to recovery. There are ways to recover. There are ways to manage every mental health condition. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. We are all sitting on it. So yeah, I always just think normalize, break down that stigma. And just using these little tools. So I mean, you'd see me in my one-to-ones. Let's get it.
Let's do it. Hello, caller. Hello.
My name is Ellen. I'm just calling regarding the
Hey, Ellen.
Hello, Ellen.
Hi. I'm just calling to share just a brief thought caregivers in general should actually, caregivers in general should actually watch out for signs and symptoms of depression in children. However, it tends to be, if I feel like a lot of caregivers, if you actually know your child or just trying to have a relationship with your child, you can actually see the signs and symptoms. Because I've noticed a lot in the Ghanaian community, it seems to be, it is stigmatized, he's right, and it seems to be a thing whereby parents are too busy to notice the children are dealing with something. For instance, I suffered from depression for 8 years, and I was actually 8 years old when I was diagnosed. I didn't actually know what it was. I just thought, I'm sad all the time. I cry every day. I don't want to eat. I can't sleep. I don't want to do anything. And my mother was always working, always busy. However, now she thinks back and she looks back and she thinks, you know what, there were signs and symptoms because, you know, her boisterous child was not a boisterous child anymore. Her outspoken child was quiet. There's little things that you can actually notice. If you do have a relationship with your child, and if you can't cultivate that, you can actually see the signs and symptoms even before it goes as far as suicidal thoughts or etc. But I think there is the whole excuse nowadays with everyone is busy. Social media controls our lives. Television is there, so we watch TV, but we don't watch our children and our youth. And it's a shame because I feel like it's a hidden illness and it's a pandemic. I mean, I look like the sort of person with everything together, everything going well for me. You know, I studied, I'm financially successful. I do everything I want. I've done everything I want, but I don't look like someone who would be under the stigma of someone who has a mental health problem.
Exactly. You see, this is what we were talking about.
Yes.
The whole thing.
If you see the people on the streets begging, some of them shouting, you know, swearing at themselves, speaking to themselves, it doesn't take, and people assume that that is what a mentally ill person is.
Exactly, and this is exactly it. This is exactly it.
It's a mentally ill guy on the street screaming, happening. That's not the case.
That's the biggest problem. That is 100% one of the biggest problems about stigma, and that whole myth around, you know, what a mentally ill person would look like is pretty much where I think I like to start with young people, because that, I think Hollywood has sort of, you know, twisted, you know, mental illness to look like a one size fits all, as if like, you know, a person with schizophrenia, they're automatically dangerous or scary, you know, then someone who's depressed is automatically crying or unable to leave home. Like they have made these almost like stereotypical images of these mental health conditions, which is where I think a lot of the stigma comes from, and why so many people struggle to speak out, because it's automatically like, okay, well, if I tell someone that I'm struggling with this, they're just going to think that, you know, I'm this. And that's what stops people from speaking out, not necessarily that they don't feel that they can speak to someone. So, Ellen, if you don't mind me asking, in your situation, what is it that stopped you from, you know, from speaking out when you were starting to experience difficulties?
Your mother is always busy. My mother was a single mother of 3 children, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. No father, so my mother was always the one who would, you know, feed us, clothe us, send us to school, and pay the bills at the end of the day. She's always tired. She's got a lot on her plate. And my sister was unwell. At one point in my teens, she suffered a mental health breakdown. So my mother had her hands full with my sister, and we had some family deaths, so my mother was dealing with quite a lot, and I didn't want to add that onto, you know, her heavy load. I mean, she's lifting all these boulders with no muscle, and then I add depression on top of that. So I was just like, I am just going to do what I need to do to keep up appearances. So I did everything that I was supposed to do as a good child. I went to school, I got the grades, I ran track, I held the record for the fastest in the school. I did everything that was expected of me, but I'll be running track, but deep inside, my heart was breaking because I couldn't speak out. I couldn't add to what my mother was dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it seems to be such a common thing. Remember, we were saying earlier in the show that it is usually the young people struggle to tell their parents because they're worried about how they're going to feel about it. And it's hard. And, where do we find the balance with that? Because, of course, if your mum is going through a lot, and as a child, of course, when you've got a good relationship with your mum and you see her going through a lot, the last thing you would want to do is add to it. But then where do we strike that balance? Where do we find the balance of, okay, yes, I understand you're busy, but I need you right now,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen, for calling.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I am, this is it. It's really this. Because I think sometimes I feel that you can start by giving your child a hug. And you need to kind of connect with your children on a higher level. Not just, how are you, blah, blah, blah. But
and not just, I'm also your parent only.
So therefore, you have to be in a kind of a connection so that possibly when there is a problem, even if you're working, you're tired, you're this and you're that, they can still tell you, because there are parents who unfortunately load their children with all sorts of issues that are ongoing around them, like, we don't have enough money,
and it's so subconscious, but it's true, it becomes a family issue from young, and you don't even realize the effect it's having on you
everyone. Have something to say and then you don't say it, because you don't want to add to the gas man and the electric man and the this man
but this is why I'm saying it's only a matter of time before we get to a place where we can talk about mental health in the same way. And I think when we are in that place, despite tiredness, because I can speak back to my own childhood, and Mum, if you're listening, I know that days she would come in tired, and I could see it on her face the second she would walk in the door. I feel like if I'm whining about a headache, she would hear about it regardless. So if we get to the stage where we can talk about it in the same way, hopefully young people will feel more comfortable to be able to talk to their parents regardless of what is going on.
Yeah. And yes, I was there when you were whining too.
Oh God.
Oh God. But I think this is it. There are times when your child complains about something and you suddenly stop everything. I remember one of my sons, he suddenly had a huge tantrum about something, and I just stopped and we all sat on the floor. What is
what is going on here?
Let's deal with this. And I think sometimes it works. Most times it works. And so maybe we're all busy, we rush around, you want to do a 9 to 5, you come home, you get dinner ready, you try and feed them, push the food down there and go. Everybody go upstairs, go and have a bath.
Can I just say, for all the parents listening, now that I'm also a working person, I do not know how any of you used to do a full 9 to 5 and come back and feed and cook every single day. I've got no idea how you guys do it. So Denise, I understand everyone's got a lot on their plates, but we have to find the balance somewhere, Denise, to sort this epidemic out.
We don't even know how we did it. We don't even know. I'm telling you, we don't.
I'm sure.
It just happened. And but now, you look back on those days and you wonder, oh, maybe I should have, maybe, sometimes you take them. The funniest thing, the other day, I remembered it and I laughed and nearly cried. I took my kids to the park and I'm waiting for them to kick the ball and I'm looking at the time. And I'm like, oh, people, hurry up. Now I think, oh my God, I should have just relaxed and, that sort of thing. But you can't, because you have other things to do and it's a Sunday and it's endless.
It is honestly so hard to slow down and just slow down. This, especially being from London. I don't know if I notice in London, and then when I go to Ghana, my pace is considerably different. I don't know if it's just London that makes you move really, really fast. But
it's London.
Yeah, London it makes you move fast.
Because you see, in Ghana and all these other places, you have help. you have help, you have people, you have, you know, and we don't live that kind of
9 to 5
capsule life
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But here, it's just you and your family, and you know, everything is according to time. You have to get them to school at a certain time. You have to get to work at a certain time. You have to leave work, run, pick up your child at a certain time, bring them home, feed them, get them bathed, pajamas, into bed. Sometimes you don't even eat, and then it's after they've all gone to bed that you eat. In this thing that we do, they tell us, oh no, you should be eating at before 7 because it's good for your health. What kind of nonsense is that? Nobody can do that. Nobody does that. So, you know, Denise, I'll tell you, people, this baby sitting in front of me, I was there when she was born. I have watched her grow up. I have listened to her tantrums. I was at your birthday party. Do you know your greatest birthday party was? Which one was it? The one where we went, everybody came. And
the 21st?
Yes, your 21st. It was so beautiful.
It was a really nice birthday.
People, I was there. And then she went to university. I was on her phone with your mom. We were talking about she took you. Yeah. And here you are. You finished school. People, God is great.
I'm telling you, you know, when I came out of uni, even though I did psychology, I still did not know what I wanted to do. And you can ask my mum when we come off the radio, ask my mum how much I used to call, and I really genuinely got to a place where I just did not know what I was going to do with my life. I didn't know what my skills were really. I knew that I liked to learn. I knew I wanted to work with people. Didn't have a clue how. So all that voluntary work and stuff I was doing at college, at university, it's so funny how even though I was doing
come together.
Yeah, but even that, it's like I was doing them, but it's like I was like ignoring the signs as to what I should be doing, because I was doing the youth work voluntary stuff, but then I was going to do HR.
Doing the youth work when you were in sixth form, wasn't it?
Yeah, college. I was an AIM higher mentor there. Then I did student mentoring in university as well. Then I did my placement year abroad, didn't I? In the orphanage.
Yes.
Then I went to Ghana. So yeah, I think the fact that I spent so long doing youth work for my voluntary work for my placement year, it should have just been a clear answer as to what I should have done when I came out of university.
You were thinking of HR then?
I think I just wanted to follow, mum's footsteps, and and I just knew I wanted to work with people. But then, and I am a very strong believer of everything happens for a reason. So the last job before I ended up at the Prince's Trust, there was I'll say this on a side note. Hopefully my old boss has not seen this and is not listening. But it was the most miserable job I have ever worked. But there was a voluntary program called Life Skills, where young people would come in once a month to do. You
have 2 minutes.
Okay, to do CV work. Oh my God, that has gone so fast.
Yeah, because we were chatting away and it was so involving. I mean, this has gone so well. I am so proud of you, Denise.
Thank you.
And I'm saying it, anyone who's listening, this is one of my babies and I'm so proud and I'm so happy. And I give you all the strength and I wish you well.
Thank you.
And
I will definitely want to come back to talk more mental health.
You will come back because this is something that you are passionate about. People, thank you so much for listening. And I will share
details with you as well for the youth workshops, for the teachers training, for the professionals training. I still feel like there was so much more that we could have talked about. So yes, please do get in touch. I would love to hear what you thought of the show. If there's anyone you're concerned about, that's it.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But people, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a wonderful 1 hour and we didn't even see the time go.
Didn't see it.
And I'm always being told off that I don't say bye-bye well enough. People, thank you for listening to this show. I wish you well. Bye-bye.
Bye.